as Monty Python would say, and now for something completely different. My channel was originally intended to be strictly for radio control model build projects that I have done over the years. However, I thought some of you may be interested in a much larger project that I took on back in the mid-80s. RC flying piqued my interest in full-size flying, and in 1978 I was fortunate enough to get my private pilot's license. In 1984, a good friend and I decided that we would build a home-built airplane. The plane you see here is a 1962 Piper Colt, which we had purchased to gather some parts for our project. This turned out to be a great buy for us because we got a lot of material, including engine and prop, for our own project. We ended up selling the parts we couldn't use and almost recovered our initial investment. Here you can see the finished welded up fuselage of the project we took on. Any guesses of what it is? It is a home-built Super Canadian, and you will shortly see that it bears a striking resemblance to a very familiar airplane. Here, the uncovered wings, landing gear, and tail feathers have been assembled. First time it starts to look like a real airplane. Some interior work has been started as well. The plywood floorboards are in, some metal sheeting is in place, and also some of the plumbing for the fuel system is in place. The black box just behind the trailing edge is the battery box. The wood strips from the trailing edge of the wing back to the tail fin give the fuselage its iconic shape. I think by now you pretty well know what this is. While my partner had been very busy doing the welding on the fuselage, he was a much better welder than I was tasked with doing the overhaul on the engine. The engine was a Lycoming 0235 C1B, which was a derated engine from 115 horsepower to 108. This was a complete overhaul with cylinder honing, new pistons, new rings, and all new bearings and seals. In this picture you can see the boot cowl construction as well as the instrument panel as work progressed. I should mention that this was originally planned to be a 2-year project, but this is the point where we're actually at 2 years. A little bit of misjudgment there. As you can see clearly in this picture, construction was taking place in my basement garage. I'm glad I had a very understanding wife. With the engine mount, and firewall now verified, it was time to move on to the next stage. Here you can see the start of the covering process. We had elected to use the Seconite 7600 process. This had several advantages over other processes on the market at the time. This one used a water-based glue, and there was no toxic fumes or smell, which was kind of important because I was working on my basement garage. Here you can see the fuselage with the fabric applied and heat shrunk. Also, there's a good shot of the metal interior, especially towards the back with the fishing pole tube, the little round circle you see at the back. To protect the fabric from the UV rays of the sun, we then applied the UV blocking paint, and this is the gray color you can see it is now. This would be the primer before the finish coat is applied. With this completed, it was now time to put the fuselage into winter storage, and you can see I fabricated a special bracket to attach to the bumper of my truck, and away it goes for the winter storage. With the fuselage now safely tucked away for the winter, it was time to start the wing covering. In this shot, the wing is upside down on sawhorses, and you can clearly see the compression struts as well as the lift strut attachment points. Of course, we used the same covering material, and we're quite pleased with the ease of application, and the work came out reasonably good. Unfortunately, these pictures kind of gloss over the amount of work that was involved to get to this stage. There was a lot of things that you don't get to see, you just get to see the finished project. But eventually they were done, and the UV protection covering was applied, and they were put in storage as well. This next picture shows the fuselage painted, the landing gear painted, And I think most of the installation of the metal interior was completed at this stage. It's really starting to look like an airplane now, but it's also taking up a lot of room in my basement. Here, my partner is working on some finishing touches on the firewall and engine mount. I think at this point he looks like he's working on the gasilator positioning. And there was lots of stuff that had to be done. Here I'm working on the engine install, and if you look inside the cockpit, you'll actually see the head of my son just peeking out around the corner. He was always there to lend a hand if need be. This next picture is a good shot of the instrument panel. Pretty much complete at this point. Only thing missing was the navcom and the clock on the upper right side. You can also see the throttle quadrants on the left side of the fuselage. This next picture shows the wing root panel with all the associated wiring, our circuit breakers, lighting rheostat, the fuel sender gauge, as well as the fuel lines coming in as well. And here we have the engine installed with all of its components basically ready to go, and just getting ready to start doing some of the finishing touches. Here's a shot of the engine with the starter installed, the starter ring installed, and the generator, which you can just barely see. To give you a better appreciation for what it was like to work on the airplane in my basement, these next two photos show just how cramped it was at the time. One thing for sure, I wouldn't be able to do it now. This basement is now fully finished, and there's absolutely no way I could get anything in there. Note the bottom cowling in this picture with the venting and the carburetor intake. Building an airplane is a series of milestones. This was the milestone we've been waiting for some time, the first engine start. With a minimum amount of fiddling, we soon had the engine purring like a cat. Speaking of cats, here's two very satisfied cats. All in all, a very satisfying day. So, with the successful engine run, it was now time to put on some of the last trim. Here the engine cowling has been finished and is painted to match the airplane. Now time to put on that famous stripe. This is probably the closest I came to a divorce during the construction of this airplane. Yes, I mashed it off and painted it in the basement. Luckily, my wife was working, and by the time she came home, all of it was done, the house was aired out, and there was only a slight remnant of smell. That said, you could say I was spraying in a confined space. The results came out quite well, and I was very pleased with the way it looked. So now it was time for a trial assembly. All components would be put together, all the control surfaces were put on, and everything was checked for the proper movement and also the incidence of the wings. A lot of stuff had to be done before we took it out to the airport. Eventually that day arrived, and here we are at the Yarmouth Airport. The plane is ready for the first flight. All we have to do is flip the coin to see who's going to be the first pilot. Unfortunately, I lost the toss, so my partner got to have the first flight, and here she is. What a beauty in the air. Fantastic. After my partner's first circuit, it was now time for my first flight, and what a joy. Very happy with the performance. Here we are after the first flights, and we're both very, very pleased with the results, as you can tell. That's me on the left and my partner on the right. These next two pictures are in-flight pictures that were taken the same day of the initial flight. And the very last picture is a couple of years actually after we had finished the airplane, and we had bought some 1800 floats, put them on, and we flew it as a float plane in the summer. We had skis in the winter, and had a lot of fun for the next 10 years. And actually, on floats, it was in front of my home, so very convenient to go flying. After mowing the lawn, jump in the airplane, go for a quick flight. Life is good. I hope you've enjoyed this departure from my normal radio control series. If you have, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of the same, hit subscribe. As I always say, more to come.